Go. Good morning, everyone. This is Ganesh Subramanian, founder and CEO of Stylumia. And thank you all for being here early this morning. Today, we are pleased to welcome a very, very special guest, Mr. Shamik Sharma. Shamik and I go together through our Myntra days. He currently heads Cultgear. And Cult, we all know, is transforming the way fitness is happening in the country, and they're also going international. He's also very special. He comes with a very rich experience in the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, and he has extensive experience in handling companies from startups to $1 billion plus stage. And his experiences include handling social media companies, gaming, e-commerce, and build large-scale technology platforms. In these days, these are super critical for any one of us in the fashion and lifestyle industry, even to think digital. I'm extremely honored to welcome Shamik, and please join me in welcoming to this talk. Over to you, Shamik.
Hey, Ganesh, and hi to all the other people who are watching and in the audience. Thanks for this invite and this opportunity. Just a quick background about myself. As Ganesh mentioned, I've been a technologist all my life, spent most of my career in the Bay Area, working with as an entrepreneur in my own startup as well, and with various other startups. Most recently, where I worked with Ganesh at Myntra as the Chief Product and Technology Officer. I'm currently at Covert and Cultgear, which is a health tech company with a sports fashion arm that we call Cult Sport. So being associated with the fashion industry, but with a different lens, I think, than most of you. I look at it from a very technology first point of view. And I hope to be able to share some of those thoughts with all of you today. I hope the session is very interactive because most of my thoughts are also forming in this new situation that we are all in. And I think we have to relook at our lives in this new normal given the situation that we will be facing in the months to come. So Ganesh, how do you want to do it? Do we want to do Q&A first, or should I just first?
Yeah. Your views on what the situation, how are you seeing COVID, and what it entails and what organizations can get ready.
So I presume, most of the audience is from the fashion industry, and we are too. Cult Sport is a relatively small, early brand. We are building a D2C sportswear brand. Our audience is targeted mainly at our existing CureFit users. We have more than several million people coming to CureFit for various health needs, including our 300 fitness centers. And that's a large audience. So Cult Sport is mainly aimed at selling into that small but fast growing audience. And these are very fitness conscious, sports loving people. So our motivation has been that, hey, no one understands them better than us because they are highly loyal to us. They love our fitness and our food and our other verticals. And hence they trust us for their sports needs as well. So our intent had been to sell to them. Now, we are doing, for a very early stage company, we're doing very well with Cult Sport. But obviously the COVID situation has upended all our plans and so on. So we all have to replan in real time. What we are seeing is obviously all the fitness centers are closed. But what has happened is we have managed to completely move digital. We had been working on this for a while, but we have launched online fitness classes. And these are classes on workouts that you can do from home. And we have seen, that growing up very rapidly in the last month or so as people have been locked down and have no other options of working out. In fact, it allows us to reach a much, much wider audience than our physical offline fitness centers ever were. And we see this as, while we're not able to do e-commerce and fulfill the other needs of these people, we do feel that eventually as the economy moves up, e-commerce will be the first area to open up. and more people will be likely to buy things online than from going to malls and offline stores. And hence we think that whenever these things open up, we'll be very well positioned to serve the needs of our clientele. There are other things that I think are more deeper and we have to think about as an industry, given this change. And those deeper things are whether people will be out there in the public, going to their offices, going to work out with other people and so on, or is working out at home individually going to be the more common thing? And this is not just about workout. I think people, if they're going to offices less, they're working from home more, they're going out to malls less, going out to movies less, and so on, then fashion has a downstream effect. And how we react to that world and what will be the new normal for fashion, I think is a deeper question that we should think about. And I think that eventually, while my opinions are also forming in this very dynamic situation, my sense is that this will have a deeper, more long-lasting effect. Initially, it will have in small percentage terms, but eventually in significant terms of how people dress up, how people wear, what they want to wear, and so on. And in that world, how does fashion react to it? I think is a very deeper, important question that we can debate in the course of this discussion.
Yeah, great, Shamik. I think I've seen you for a while, and you've been one of the rare first principle, I would call it first principle problem solvers, thinking all the problems to the bottom of it, right? So, what do you see at the fundamental level of the COVID situation? What is it causing for the, let's say, fashion lifestyle retail business?
Yeah. So, firstly, if you go down to the depth of it, like why do people dress up, right? And why do people wear what they want to wear? There are many different customer segments that we have found during Myntra days also from researching and finding out why do people wear and buy what they want to wear. And, most people here are from the fashion industry and have worked in it for decades and are more experienced than myself. But I'm sure that we can deconstruct it, and we all know that there are different need states that people have. And while I won't elaborate all those need states, but we went through that whole analysis even at Myntra, why people buy, and there's many different need states. And reality is when I look at those list of need states, about half or more than half of them just evaporate in a in a post-COVID world. So, I want to go to a party. I have a date with my friends to go into a concert, or etc., etc. Many of these use cases that are reasons for people for buying what they buy just evaporates, because at least for another, my view, at least 18 months, a lot of these public gatherings and large events will not happen. And they say that, for a person to have a habit, it takes about 90 days, right? When we talk of 18 months, that's a very long period. So our habits will change, our need states will change. By the time you come out of having done the same thing again and again for 18 months, the way you socialize, the way you party, the way you meet other people, when you have kind of kept that new normal for 18 months, the need states themselves will change. And those need states, almost half of them will go away. And I think, all of us in the fashion industry are in different segments. But as you look at your segments, I think it'll be very important to understand, which need states do I think is impacted by how much. And, my fear is that many of them will not be needed. But it doesn't mean that purchase as overall for the industry will go down by half. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it will shift. And those shifts are also important to kind of model out and predict and say, where do we think those need states are shifting to? And what does that mean as an industry in terms of manufacturing capacity, design, how our catalog should look, how we present it, and even the voice that we are saying and the messaging and the marketing, that needs to change as well. I suspect that for at least for 6 months, we can't be going out with the message of, oh, you look trendy and happy and cheerful when people are dying around you, right? So all of that needs to be packaged together into a product offering that is appropriate for these new times.
Yeah, that's a profound perspective, Shamik. Any construct that you suggest? How do you go about drill this down?
Yeah, I mean, it's too early to say because the data is still coming in of how things will pan out. I think a big factor is how long this COVID situation lasts. If and I'm not a clinician or a statistician, so I don't know how things will pan out. But it could last from anywhere from, let's say, 3 months and things become a lot better. Or it could last even 18 months. I don't mean 18 months in the current lockdown situation. Obviously, it will be ups and downs of hotspots here and so on. But it will mean that, for example, travel is highly restricted, public gatherings are highly restricted, and so on. So there's a wide range of possibilities. My sense is I am more of the belief that this will last for quite a while in some form, not like all lockdown, but it will be highly restricted for almost 18 months until vaccines and so on come into play. And in that world, if you were to model that scenario, then I think the way to kind of construct it, one way to construct how you might think about it is to model out all your categories that you are in and to model out, there's obviously seasonality as well. So you model out with seasonality, what do I expect, which categories to work out better, which categories will not likely to recover very quickly, and to shift your inventory, shift your planning, shift the whole pipeline of raw materials, etc., into the categories that are more likely to work out, right? And then you kind of bought yourself time for 18 months for things to kind of hopefully recover. But even after they recover, again, don't assume that it will be the same assortment plan that you had before. So all of that will also change. So this becomes a very complex but important modeling exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not going to be, one plan for a long period. I think one needs to be nimble, flexible, reactive rather than, but maybe a cold start with a forecast and then keep revising as things develop.
Correct. I mean, obviously the challenge with that in our industry is that, a lot of that we tend to be, unfortunately, a long lead time based industry with design and manufacturing and raw material collection and so on. So you have to kind of balance that with the need of how to be nimble. But definitely the need of the hour today is to be more agile, more nimble, less inventory, faster turns, etc.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shamik. What we can do is we'll go over the questions and I will ask you one by one the way it has come, and some of them have been voted. And I also ask the audience, in case some new questions have come up, please feel free to, text your question here. Feel free to ask also. It's okay, no problem. Let's go ahead. As you know, most of retail even today is offline. Everyone wants to think and act like a digital only company. How do you think like a digital only retailer?
A good question. I don't know how you think, because you kind of grew up to be one. I guess it's very hard to think of yourself transforming it very quickly. But the most important thing is that we have to realize that the new generation is all digital. That what we think is cannot be done online is done online, right? And this has been my experience for last 20 plus years in this industry, that whenever people say that, oh, that cannot be done online, right? Like, oh, you cannot buy clothes online used to be the refrain in 2011. Ganesh, you remember that very well. And now, people buy a lot online. Similarly, you can't run an office, right, online. And now we're all running offices online, right? So it's always, whenever somebody tells me, I've kind of taken that on myself as a mantra, right? If somebody says that this cannot be done online, it can be done online. So people just say, you cannot work out of online. Come on, that is obviously not possible, right? Because it's your body. And now today we have more than 1 million people working out online every single day with us at Cult Live, right? So it's, I would say almost everything that people say cannot be done online will be done online. And, to the extreme, and I'm going to be a little bit far-fetched here and then hopefully be proven wrong myself, is that people say that clothes, actual physical clothes, have to be physical. I mean, obviously I'm making the damn clothes, right? How can it be online? My sense is that as people are spending more and more time online, your background, Ganesh, is virtual, right? My clothes here, you don't know if it's actually real, right? I think we'll come to a world where we are not really designing physical clothes. If most of us are spending time on Zoom and working from home, I think we will even design these clothes, just virtual characters, and we'll just put them on. And I'll wear a more business-oriented shirt for a more professional meeting and T-shirts for my family calls, right? So I think, we're going into that world where we have to see what is our core capability. Is it design? Is it manufacturing? Is it marketing? Because for some of our companies, the answer will be design. And if it is design, then you have an advantage. Your advantage is that you're not restricted really to physical design. If your capability is, that you can make people look beautiful, you can make them look beautiful online as well. My son probably spends 10 plus hours on some kind of video game or the other, and he's buying skins and characters and backpacks and so on. Probably this month I've spent more on virtual clothes and accessories and virtual fashion than I have on real fashion, right? So I think in 5-10 years from maybe even earlier, who knows, that industry of virtual goods, and when I say virtual fashion goods, may start becoming significantly large. And we have to see if our core capabilities match the requirements of that need state. I don't want to exaggerate this. This is still a very small, obviously, part of the overall fashion industry. But things grow very quickly in the digital world. So in a few years, we might see ourselves as that being a core capability that we can leverage to become more digital. But there are other avenues as well. There's digitization in manufacturing process. There's digitization in many other things that we can as an industry, we can adopt. The key thing is that if we want to be agile, which is going to be probably the more and more the important need in this industry, then digitization in other aspects of the industry also plays an important role.
No, amazing, Shamik. I don't think I never looked at my virtual background coming onto my clothes. this is, I would say, I don't know whether they are moonshots and they can be near shots. I think thinking digital is also a lot with envisioning, right? Visualize what could happen. And this whole thing about, maybe the question to ask is there anything which is not possible in digital? Right?
Yeah, no.
Maybe that's really interesting. And there are a lot of people on the audience, are from the design community. And I think it's a huge leg up in terms of, how design can sustain. And that's one thing that the human capability will continue to remain for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe get amplified by technology, but that creation by itself is amazing. We'll move on to the next question. How are you using digital during lockdown? I think you did mention, but maybe you can elaborate. Any learning from the last few weeks?
Yeah, so learnings have been all, very things I would not have expected. So first learning is that a company doesn't need an office, right? In fact, I think we have been way more productive in the last 3-4 weeks than we were before. Now, obviously, our manufacturing capabilities and all of that is shut down. So, there is obviously the productivity is not there on the overall pipeline. But all the pent up things that we had wanted to do and we didn't have time for, just if I look at the total productivity of the company in terms of getting things done, it's quite amazing, how much we are able to get done through, just video conferencing and so on while sitting at our homes. So I'm really questioning, this need why we all had offices and why we were all traveling on the roads and, stuck in traffic for an hour each way and, torturing ourselves into an office. But besides that, the way we've been dealing with the situation, CureFit is a large company now. We are doing many initiatives. Many of the initiatives that we are doing are very amenable to digital. And we have refocused our energies to those digital initiatives. An example of that is the live classes that we are doing online. We have focused all our energies, the marketing, everything else to that. And that is showing incredible growth in the last few weeks. So we will actually probably exit this COVID situation as a stronger, better, higher, bigger awareness company than we entered it. So I would say that those are the primary ways in which life has changed, focusing more on digital and figuring out new ways of working from home. The other smaller things that we are noticing, and these are, tidbits, is that what I found is that we do an all hands very regularly. Used to do it every single day last week, and now we have moved to 3 days a week, where the whole company comes together on Zoom, right? And what we have found is that it creates a very different dynamic, because when people are presenting, even though it's a 5-10 minute short talk, it's an opportunity to talk to the whole company, right? And you can actually, that forum was not possible. I mean, you might have a all hands once in a month when you have several hundred people, but here you can do it every single day. And the communication gaps, it kind of collapses, and the awareness it brings of what other people are doing across the company is extremely positive. So you may never get this opportunity once you're back in an office, right? I would say that this is a great learning for me, that while as a senior leader and so on, you tend to be aware of a lot of things. Many people in a larger and larger company are not aware of all of these things. And once you are having a forum in which everyone can share every day, it becomes a highly productive, it becomes a much more empowered organization, and they become much more effective. So those are a couple of tidbits. There's several other smaller learnings we've had and things we've implemented. But
very interesting. I think communication gets amplified, and there are no space constraints, and it didn't occur to us maybe otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, an office can only hold, like a meeting room can only hold 8 people. So that kind of becomes a bottleneck, why you can only have meetings of 5 to 8 people. Now, obviously, you don't want to go on the meeting side as well, because then people are only in meetings. But if you can condense the meetings into 1 hour a day, then I think it amplifies the awareness throughout the organization very well.
Absolutely. So the next question is, will marketplace e-commerce move on to social commerce like China in WeChat, etc.? And do you think Indian customers and businesses are ready?
Social commerce, Ganesh, that, we were big on this at Myntra and burnt our fingers, right? I do think India will have a big social commerce moment, but it's very hard to predict in digital world what the timing of something will be. My gut feeling right now is, and in the last 2-3 years, we have actually seen that with Meesho, for example, doing, home agents delivering in your apartment complex and so on. We have also seen that in other forms of smaller influencer-led marketing. But as a overall, significant force, I still think it is a few years away. And once one looks at it from first principles and say, how will you predict the right time for this? It's a GDP related thing. The household income has to be a certain amount where it becomes largely a very disposable purchase for you. And when you come to that thing, then you're buying it in a much more of a want thing than a need thing. And that, there's many influences why social becomes the main reason for you to buy it. And we haven't reached there as a country yet in large numbers. Of course, there are pockets that have, but so it's not yet reached that state where I think it's a large driver of fashion sales. Now, of course, it's not to say that you can't build a sizable business by serving just those pockets where it does have an effect. But I think it's still about 4 or 5 years away.
So that's interesting perspective, Shamik, that, what you're saying is that if you have to have a conspicuous purchase or an impulse purchase in social, you need to have a different level of a disposable income.
Yes.
Right. So that's related to the economy.
Yeah. So which is also why I think, social commerce will, it was picking up. And if you look at the trends, it has been from a very small basis growing. But given the COVID situation, I would actually, as an investor also, and I'm an agent investor, it has put a dampener on that, because again, disposable purchase, conspicuous purchases, and impulse purchases become more common when you're not worried about your job or the amount of wealth in your bank and etc. Right? That I suspect will become less so in the next 24 months at least.
Yeah, therefore, in the near term, I think use social for engagement.
Yes.
Rather than commerce as the main lever.
Right. So, for marketing, for lead generation, for awareness, for brand building, I think that is a good use. But for actual social commerce, I think, COVID has put a dampener on that growing curve.
No, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Other question is, you've started Cultgear from scratch, and I'm sure other startups, but I just want to elaborate this question maybe to a context, saying that, and we all saying that all brands and retailers right now have to revisit their business more frequently than ever before. Now that makes all businesses like startups.
Yeah.
So therefore, the question is, how do you go about thinking, building a startup, and how to solve the problems? So this is not what businesses are used to.
Yeah,
They think 1 year, 6 months, quarter at the best.
correct. So I think it'll be a very, unfortunate but interesting time in the next 18 months, because I have always been a startup guy, throughout my life. And I have continuously gone back into that mode. Even after you get to a certain stage, I kind of get antsy and go back to building something from 0 to 1, right? And when you're in that startup world, right, building something from scratch, you are always kind of living hand to mouth. You don't know when your money will run out. You don't know, where the big breakthrough will come, etc. So, while there is one business aspect to it of how you operate and what your business processes should be, there's also the psychological aspect of it, which is that you should be comfortable with zero revenue effectively, right? And how do you build in that situation? And unfortunately, now I think all of us across the industry have come to a state where I think probably at least this quarter, it'll be zero revenue, right? And so in effect, it has made everyone flat, right? It has made the whole industry saying, okay, you are all going to be like startups, right? You will have to figure out how to survive. And there are two things that are very important. One of them is, how do you provide that business leadership of understanding how to navigate this world, which is, I think, an ample supply amongst the leaders here. But the second thing, which I think is in short supply, is how do you psychologically deal with this situation? And when I say that, I don't mean a person like that leader having the psychological wherewithal to be able to do it. It is about the organization, right? Because many people have joined a particular organization with a certain implicit promise in that, hey, I'm joining X, you're a big company, you'll take care of me, you're not going to, run out of cash in the next quarter or 6 months, right? But that expectation has been implicitly set between the employer and the employee. In a startup, that is not just implicit, it's explicit, right? But in a larger company, it is not. And I find that bringing the organization along to radical changes is going to be much harder at bigger companies. So I would encourage all the leaders to prepare for that and to prepare the organization, because it takes a journey to bring all the employees from state A to state B. And you can't just say, issue a message and then say, okay, hey guys, we're going to pivot all our stuff from, high trend, very fashionable things to this more core need. For example, if that is the shift that you need to make, it'll be very hard to bring, because the designer has designed with that expectation, has joined with that expectation, the production guy has joined with that expectation, the QC guy has joined with that expectation, and now you're suddenly pulling the rug from under their feet. Whereas in a startup, that's very easy to do, because everyone has joined with that expectation that, hey, next month I could be asked to do something else, right? So it's much easier to pull off. But I would ask all the leaders here to think of it like that and start that journey.
I think my take on this is that, the entire business has become flat, right? We are all on the same level playing, be it you are a $1 billion company or a startup. We have almost come to a zero revenue space. I think a very interesting perspective. And looking from there and planning in the future is going to be very interesting. The next one is, you have been through the 2000 digital bubble, Shamik, and also you have seen the 2008 recession. Any learnings that you can pick from there for this situation?
Yeah, so I would say, my first learning from both of those situations and from the current one as well is, live well below your means, right? And I mean that as a personal advice, but also as a business, right? If you have to conserve cash, and these downturns last a lot longer than people expect. People are optimistic by nature, like, as a society, we tend to always rationalize, and we always tend to think that, oh, we will recover. And that is, the core great thing about humans, that we always have hope, right? But as an operating principle as well, while we need to tap into that optimism, we also need to operate with a lot of pessimism about how we are going to deal through a significantly long period, much longer than I think most people expect. It always lasts more, and it doesn't usually last more in the very intense section. The intense section will be short, but the ramifications tend to take a long time. People are out of jobs, then there are NPAs, then banks go down, blah, 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 whatever. I don't know what will happen here, but there's a whole sequence of things that, keep on happening. And that thing keeps on, bad news keeps coming one after the other, and causes a very protracted period before things start recovering. I had started a company in 2001, just before the whole market tanked. And, we had raised fortunately money just before that, but I was expecting that, oh, in 6 months, 1 year, things will be fine. I have, 2 years of cash. And from 2001, from the time there to actually the economy recovering was 2004, 2005, right? It was so long. It was, I got a lot of gray hair in those 4 years, right? So, and the same thing with 2008, it took all the way from 2008 to 2011 before things started recovering. My sense is that, this will also be similar. It will pick up. I mean, things will start getting better, but it will take a lot longer from a financial perspective than most people plan for. And hence, I would say, apply your frugality to be able to last out.
Yeah, time to be frugal. Well said, Shamik. Next question is, you have been a strong believer in data-driven decision making. How important is this during these situations?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit, right? But see, data is good for pattern matching. When something is going according to a certain predictable thing, then data allows you to project. So there are war times and there's peace times. In peace times, data actually plays a very good role because, you have a certain trend and you can look at the data and you can predict. In wartime and situations like this is an unprecedented. Nobody could have applied data and said, oh, COVID will happen, obviously, so you need to plan accordingly, right? So in times like this, actually, I think your EQ has to play a much, much stronger role than your IQ. And it's a lot of intuition, because if you want to project out what sales, if I ask anybody here right now, okay, what is your sales going to be in June? I don't think anybody can apply any data and be able to tell any semblance, which will be even plus minus 30% of that, right? So, and anybody who claims otherwise is just bullshitting, right? So, and probably if I ask H2 revenue also, it would be the same, like nobody can predict. So in these moments like this, it's a lot about judgment, it's a lot about intuition, and this is where experience and past things help, even though that is also of limited experience, because this situation is completely new than in 2008 or 2001 or 1998 or even in previous recession.
Yeah, well said. You need to start with a judgment, and I'm sure as you take the decisions, you need to track whether judgments are coming true.
Yeah. So you need to track, how your decisions are working out, and be very dynamic and be able to change those decisions if the data from that decision is now reflecting differently.
Yeah, a question from the audience, Vanita has asked, people are using online videos to work out, myself included, because they are in lockdown. A lot of these offerings are in front of the paywall. How do you see monetizing the online offerings and the competition faced in this space?
Yeah, so first of all, I would encourage you to use CultLive because it's not behind a paywall. It's actually free as of now. Secondly, I would say that, most of these models would move to a freemium model, and the freemium model would include a certain number of classes or so on per month that you can do for free. But as you know, for staying fit, you need to do a certain number of exercises regularly. So anybody who becomes a regular exerciser and likes these classes and likes this format will hopefully convert to a paid model. And this has been shown in the West. This actually happens. So anywhere from, let's say, 10 to 30% of people will convert. And that is a good business model.
Thank you.
Yeah, just going through the other questions, Shamik, one of the questions which is coming up is, what should a brand not do during these times?
Good question. I mean, I think if I look at all the things that a brand typically does, marketing is obviously big, right? I would say that, marketing, you can do marketing, but it should be in tune with the psyche of the times, right? So a typical fashion advertising of, hey, look how good I look, right? That fundamental message, I think, is not appropriate for the time. So your marketing has to be in tune with what people are feeling. So the whole typical industry-wide, phenomena and the message is, look good, feel good, right? That doesn't resonate very well. If I tell somebody, hey, right now I call up my sister and say, hey, look good, feel good, I think she'll just slap me, so what are you talking about? So I think we have to be appropriate for our time. So that I would say on the marketing side. On the production and design side, again, I think the colors we use, the language we speak in the designs, the functionality of the products, they have to kind of at least echo what people are wanting. So I would say if you have to stop doing something, don't just take what you had in your pipeline of design and production and just say, okay, that is, I had it in plan, the company's opened up, economy opened up, let me do the same thing. I think that's not going to work out as well. So at least for the next cycle, to be a little bit more in tune with what people will actually want.
Got it. Next question, and just there's a fair amount which has come up. Customer psychology is being questioned a lot recently. Is it time to move to use technology like sentiment analysis or tools to serve better? How can you use user data for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the good news is that people's feelings and so on are now all out in the open, the social media and so on. So sentiment tracking, being able to analyze what people want, looking at social medias, what clothes they wear on social media, etc., is a good way to kind of get some hints. Now, a lot is, when things are very dynamic and changing, it'll take a little while for that data to settle down. So I think, you can't react based on very sparse data. So, it's very unclear how long that will be. So I don't have a very definitive answer on that, that you can actually use sentiments and be able to predict, because sentiments is a very, emotions are two things. There's long-term emotion and short-term emotion. What I feel right now today in this 1 hour doesn't necessarily mean, if I feel bad right now, doesn't mean I'm generally a sad person. So we have to kind of disassociate that as well.
Interesting perspective, Shamik. And a lot of data, as you're saying right now, is that you need to see with the context of, is it temporally happening for short term? Is it happening for long term? Again, there is a bit of judgment which is happening. Therefore, during these time, I can see an underlying theme that you need to be cognizant of what's happening overall macro view, take a position, keep reviewing and, responding.
Yeah.
For other question, very related to the previous one, what are the top 5 changes in consumer behavior post-COVID that you are anticipating?
So a lot of them, for pertinent for this audience, I would say I do expect that there'll be a larger shift to e-commerce rather than offline. And that will just be not because, of anything else, but the fear of congregating in large or closed spaces. So that is one. I see outdoor activities, which unfortunate, like, running and, going on marathons and so on, had been a good trend that had been coming up in India. I see a dampener on that for the next, 18 months at least. The other things I see pertinent to this industry is I don't know how the production pipelines in all our manufacturing spots in the country, how they're going to react and how they're going to get labor, how they're going to, manage the workforce in those closed tailoring spaces, all of that, so they will also have to figure out that world, right? Often I think in this industry, we work at the top level of talking to the customer and so on, but there's a lot of supply chain problems at the bottom that need to be resolved, and how it will get resolved in this industry is an open question for me, because this tends to be a very compact, people-heavy industry, which means that a lot of people need to congregate in small indoor spaces, which is not very healthy from a COVID situation. So how the supply chain reacts is a very crucial question for this industry. We think of what the customers will react. My sense is that will be solvable in some way or the other by shifting our assortments and so on. But how the supply chain and all of that works, especially with cross-border commerce also being constrained, that will be the more tricky problem to navigate.
No, absolutely. I was speaking to somebody in US the other day that, people are trying to now track sanitation. Can I actually track this today? Can I track compliance?
Yeah.
Is there an RFID solution, etc.? But looks like maybe healthcare and lots of other businesses will imbibe healthcare practices very soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a retail store will have a lot of checks as much as maybe an ICU.
Yeah, I presume temperature checks will become like the absolute necessity for entering a mall, for example.
Yeah.
And the total number of people that can enter into a mall will be highly restricted.
No, absolutely. Shamik, this is a last question, unless the audience has any question, because a lot of people are looking about it is a people question, right? A lot of people looking at their career and what next and what should I be doing from that perspective. And we had multiple sessions with CEOs, and there are 2 points of view which is coming up. One is, one CEO was saying that this is the time, if I have to do anything, I need people who really do very good at something. right? I need a lot of specialists. You're saying that in the short term, short, medium term during this period, and jack of all trades might not help. For your point of view, and you have anything else to add on this?
Yeah, see, I'll just take a very macro view. I take the opposing view, which is that, in a situation of great change, which is what the next 18 months will be, is my thought. Then in the period of great change, you will need to pivot many times. And you'll need to pivot from one category to the other, one way of selling to another, from one way of production to another, and so on. And specialists tend to have a hard time shifting from one place to the other, which is why startups generally tend to hire generalists in the early days, right? Not that I am saying that generalists are always better, because as the company grows and becomes more mature, specialists have a much more, or at least a big role to play. But when situations become more dynamic, more uncertain, much more rapid change is happening, then generalists are much more useful. Not because they are much better at doing any one task, but because the tasks that you might ask them to do are going to be very, very different. And having that flexibility and agility in the business is actually a key asset. So at this time, if I had to pick, I would definitely pick a generalist.
No, got it. Thanks for that, Shamik. Would you then split this into operational, non-operational roles, or would you look at generalists even at operational roles?
I would pick generalists even at operational roles. And we are seeing this actually in our own small business. We are shifting as we speak the way, we are going to planning to make our production, the way we do QC, the way we are going to do warehousing, and so on, right? And if we had got somebody who was, for example, a warehousing expert in a certain type of warehousing, right, that person would be very highly resistant to the kind of changes we are making. So that would cause a lot of, see, a company has so much mental, just like a company has so much mental energy as well, besides the physical energy. If you're spending a lot of mental energy in just trying to convince people to do X versus Y, it takes a lot more mental energy and time to convince a specialist to move from X to Y. Whereas a generalist, you just call them and say, yeah, whatever, right? I used to do X, I can do Y, right? And the whole company moves forward much more quickly and faster and with a lot more passion. Whereas, you can think of myself as a specialist, right? I'm a technologist. If you ask me to do marketing, I'll probably say, you know what, I could do it, but I'll probably, you'll take me a month to just convince me, right? So that's harder.
Absolutely. I think if I have to just maybe go with what you're saying, that it may not be generalist specialist conversation as much as mental flexibility conversation.
Correct.
Right. Therefore, this is the time to look for flexibility in thinking.
Yeah.
Right, and doing, and rather than looking at rigid ways of both. And I also like this whole thing about mental, the capital you have and also the physical capital you have. Very, very interesting. Shamik, I think wonderful talking to you. If you have any closing remarks before we move on.
No, I think, I may have sounded a little pessimistic in the conversation, but overall, I would say that having been through 2-3 of these downturns, right, I would say that the good news is that if you look at from a very distant view, that dip that happens in one's career, in one's life, as one's business, and so on, in the very long view, it tends to look like almost like a small little dip in the curve, right? Even though when you're living it, it's very painful. So I would say that, there's this, one to have a little bit of a longer view, of course, to have all the right operating principles to be able to wade through this crisis. But at a very long term, humans are very resourceful, very innovative, and, we always are optimistic. So we will eventually come out. It may be a little bit longer than most people expect, but we will bounce back and be much stronger than ever. And when we bounce back, as an industry, as a species, right, we'll be much, much stronger and get to even bigger heights.
No, it's amazing, Shamik, the way you put it. In the long term, if you look at any trend graph, there'll be dips and blips and all of that. But if you see the overall trend, it's all moving up. It's a great note to end this conversation. And I would like to really thank you. And every question that I was asking you, I was learning personally. And I'm sure the audience, right? And very, very enriching and very different perspectives. Thank you very much once again.
Oh, thanks, Ganesh. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And and rest of stay safe. And
Ganesh, this is Ravi. Is it okay if I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please go ahead, Ravi. And you can introduce yourself, Ravi, to Shamik.
Hey, Shamik, it was amazing listening to you. This is Ravi Kaniganti. I work for Target. Again, I'm very passionate about sustainability and all that. So that's the reason I'm asking this question. So I think I like what you said about the fashion trends and, not having these gatherings. But other thing, what we are all learning and I'm hearing from my friends and family is that suddenly they realize that, hey, the whole wardrobe full of stuff is of no use, right? Again, people who are already thinking about minimalistic living, they actually experienced it right now, right? So based upon what you're seeing, do you see a big uptick in the sustainability efforts of all these retailers going to do, and as well as the even from a consumer point of view to have like a more like a minimalistic living approach, what are your views on it?
Yeah, so there's two separate questions implicit in that, right? It's a very good question. I think minimalism and living within your means and so on will be almost sure from the customer's point of view, if for no other reason, if not for very honorable reasons. Let's say it's mostly just because of financial constraints, right? We are entering into a time where the economy is going to be difficult and most people are going to be conservative, and because of that reason people are not going to make as many impulse purchases and so on. So for if no other reason, not necessarily because they believe much in minimalism and sustainability, it's almost forced upon them that fashion tends to become much more conservative in terms of amount of purchases. On the supply side, however, which is will companies therefore become more sustainable, use better ways of making and so on, that I think is a different question. And I suspect not, primarily because they themselves will be economically crunched. And hence instituting processes that are going to increase their costs, while they should do that in the long run, this may not be the time. This would probably be the time for them to conserve cost, manage their finances, manage their P&L, manage their balance sheet, and may not have the resources to rejig themselves to become more sustainable, or whatever process changes or equipment changes they need to do so. This would be a very difficult time even for, as an industry, to ask them to apply, new processes and new ways of working in terms of increasing costs. So there'll be, I think, a dichotomy in what the demand side looks like and what the supply side looks like.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Great. Hey, Ganesh, I think you're on mute.
Hi, Shamik. I have a question.
Sorry, I was just thanking you. Ajay, you have any question?
Shamik, I am Ajay, and I'm working for urban lifestyle brands. So my question, it was very nice on the inputs what we have given, current technology, what it is capable of. So my question was, how does technology actually quantify the benefits? Because by itself it is coming with some cost, and how does the management take up this cost in the current crisis? Because we are currently cutting down on costs, and because this is one of the costs of managing the whole thing. Now everybody wants to be digital, but it itself comes with a cost. How do you quantify this?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? At Myntra or at Covert, we don't look at technology as a cost, right? We look at it as a revenue driver. So if you haven't invested in IT and you've not got a team that is largely, digital, then obviously when you are putting it in, it will seem like a cost, right? But if you are first thinking that, my store is digital and my way of selling is digital, then, you're not going to think of it as a cost as much, right? But of course, for a business where digital has not been a big factor, then starting up a digital thing will significantly require significant amount of capex in the beginning. So that is why I fear that in making that shift right now, it will be very difficult for industries that are not already digital. And I don't really have a good answer of how to navigate that, but because it does require a cultural change, it does require investing capex in the beginning. The payoff tends to be a little bit late. So there's no good answer. I would say that what you can do is apply digital in the small ways that you can in your existing business. So putting more data, for example, analytics should be something which is almost like a no-brainer nowadays in this world, right? Because you need to be more agile, more quicker, and so on. And anyway, even if not for this situation, I think most businesses are becoming more analytical. So applying a good data collection platform, data analysis platform that helps your business leaders, that is, the ROI for that is extremely high. So putting that in place at least would be the first step.
Okay, thanks, Shamik.
Yeah, Shamik, I think, questions are just flowing in. This is last question, I would say, in the interest of time. This is from a digital e-commerce retailer. E-commerce companies struggle with digital marketing as a cost in terms of percentage of revenue.
Yeah.
Post-COVID, how is the landscape of digital marketing going to change?
A very good question. And, frankly, as most of you know, while e-commerce has been gaining market share, it has not yet become profitable. And the biggest cost reason for it is that because of the cost of customer acquisition per sale. It's not even that, once you've acquired a customer, then that customer is yours forever. You kind of have to spend money again and again to reacquire the customer. And this is a big reason why, at least in India, it's not yet become profitable, even though in the West and China, there have been very profitable models that have been built up after you reach scale. So it's very difficult for a small brand, frankly, to build up a digital presence because it's very costly. Facebook advertising, Google advertising is expensive. Having said that, in this world, right, in the COVID world, this is actually an advantage for a while. I'm not saying forever, but for a while, a lot of offline to online transition will happen. So the ROI on every dollar spent will be higher for a period. Now, how much higher and is it going to recoup all of the cost? I don't know, but it's definitely a positive in that, just in that part of the equation. And the second thing is that actually, since fewer people are advertising on Google and Facebook, the rates are also lower. For sure now, but I think probably for a while as well. And because of this, again, the cost is lower, the returns are higher, the ROI is going to be advantageous for a while. I think that will settle down, so that's not a long-term sustainable strategy, but it's definitely a way to kind of build up a brand digitally for at least a 6 to 12-month period.
Very interesting. Thanks, Shamik, and thanks once again for your time, and very, very valuable. And thanks everybody in the audience. Stay safe.
Thank you, Ganesh.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.